Let's talk about day one of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial. We have our opening statements and we have our first witness give most of her testimony. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to Legalbytes. If you are new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So today we kicked off the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial with the opening statements and with the direct and cross-examination of our first witness, Miss Christi Dembrowski, Johnny Depp's sister. Because Johnny Depp is the plaintiff in this case, first we heard the opening statements from his team. And as a quick side note, just note that it is called an opening statement, not an opening argument. At the very end of trial, you have something called a closing argument. And the reason why it's called an argument at the end is because the lawyers are able to use the evidence that has been placed in front of the jury and been admitted into evidence at trial. But because we are at the very beginning of this trial, no evidence has been admitted. Nothing has been seen by the jury until the actual witness testimonies. So at the opening statement, you have a basic narrative that is going to be given by the two sides, and with statements saying, quote unquote, the evidence will show. The evidence will show that Johnny Depp is an abuser. The evidence will show that Johnny Depp is not an abuser. Now, as I said, the opening statement is all about framing the narrative. It's one of the very few opportunities that the lawyers have to speak directly to the jury. And so it's very important for setting the stage. Not only do these lawyers give a roadmap for what the jury is about to see, but they also give them a chance to organize the facts into a specific narrative so that the jury can remember them, and specifically remember them in a way that is most beneficial to their client. Note that each lawyer wants the jury to use their framing so that the facts fill in according to what is most beneficial to their client. At the same time, this is a great time to introduce a theme or a motif. Picking up a buzzword to be repeated throughout the trial is a fantastic idea so that it can start jumping out at the jury as they take in each witness's testimony. If they hear a certain term repeated over and over again, it reinforces the narrative that this lawyer wants. So the most important part here is not necessarily to get all of the details in this case in front of this jury at the very beginning, but rather to hit the most important highlights so that the jury knows where to place all of these individual details that they're about to be bombarded with, and to take the sting out of any bad facts, so to speak. One thing that we heard about today in the opening statements is that Johnny Depp does have a history of alcohol and drug use. Now, those facts are fairly prejudicial, but they don't necessarily kill a case depending on what the lawyers on each side do with it. Anyway, what was interesting about today's opening statements is that they were a little bit unique. You see, normally an opening statement is going to be delivered by just one attorney from each side. But here, in this case, both sides decided to split up their opening statements between two different attorneys, one male attorney and one female attorney. On Johnny Depp's side, part one of the opening statement was delivered by attorney Ben Chu, and part two was delivered by attorney Camille Vasquez. The first part of the opening statement was all about setting up the legal claims and the statements that were made by Amber Heard that are alleged to be defamatory by Johnny Depp, and setting up who Johnny Depp is and what has happened to him as a result of all of the events in this case. Ben Chu talked about Johnny's mom dying the week that Amber filed for a domestic violence restraining order against him and also filed for divorce. He said that the evidence would show that Amber was in fact the aggressor here, who recast herself as the victim. Then he said that the evidence would also show that Johnny Depp had never been accused of domestic violence before in any of his prior relationships. Now, this last comment drew an objection from the Heard legal team. Objections in opening statements usually are fairly rare. Number one, juries typically don't really like them all that much because what you're doing is you're interrupting a narrative that they probably actually want to hear. Number two, when you object to an opening statement, it also flags something for the jury that says that you don't like what it is that the other side is saying. And if the objection is then overruled, the opposing side can also basically pounce on it and repeat that same bad fact multiple times. Now, in Ben Chu's portion of the opening statement, Heard's legal team lost on that objection, and what he did was he pounced on it by repeating multiple times, as I was saying, Johnny Depp has never been accused of domestic violence by any previous partner. This was an opportunity that was opened up for him, and he took it. Anyway, then Camille Vasquez tag-teamed him to basically serve as Johnny Depp's attack dog. Although it admittedly is a little weird to tag team an opening statement, in my opinion, this ended up being actually a great move for them because it avoids the look of the quote-unquote institutional men in power attacking the little lady who dared to speak out. Those kind of aesthetics can actually really matter in these cases, and having a woman come out and deliver the more accusatory parts of the opening statement against the defendant is actually a great strategy. Now, by the end of this opening statement, we arrived at our main motif, and the word is drama or dramatic. According to Depp's legal team, Amber Heard is dramatic, she exaggerates, and she's both physically and verbally abusive. The evidence would show, they said, that he would try to get away, she would follow him, she would try to fight him, he would try to avoid her. And then they said she tried passing bad photos as evidence, which they can't authenticate. Essentially, she's lying or she's exaggerating at the very least. So that was the opening statement for Depp's legal team. On Amber Heard's side, they more or less used the same strategy in terms of breaking up the opening statement between a male attorney first and a female attorney afterwards. Ben Roddenborn started things off. He gave their basic legal claims and set their theme. He said this is about the First Amendment, and anyway, at the end of the day, she's telling the truth about Johnny Depp too. The bit about the First Amendment comes in because he says Amber Heard's op-ed in the Washington Post wasn't really about Johnny Depp. It was about Me Too. It was about domestic violence. It was about other important public matters. And then he said, context matters. The individual statements at issue in this case couldn't be taken in a vacuum or as cherry-picked by the other side, he said. They have to be taken in context. So Roddenborn then read the entire op-ed in his opening statement. I think generally this was an effective strategy, but personally, I would have preferred to see this op-ed read not by him, but by Elaine Bredehoft, the female attorney who took up the second part of Heard's opening statement. Maybe this is just my personal preference, but hearing the very gendered tone of Amber's op-ed talking about women's issues felt kind of weird coming from a male attorney, in the same way that Camille Vasquez on the other side kind of needed to be the attack dog. But anyway, aside from that, Roddenborn actually did a fairly decent job of framing the narrative and introducing this theme of the First Amendment, as well as a motif of Johnny Depp as the quote-unquote monster. And then part 2 of Amber's opening statement was delivered, like I said, by the attorney Elaine Bredehoft. She has a very conversational style that I think is, generally speaking, very appealing. And having her respond to Miss Vasquez's accusations and even delivering some of her own was also a good move. Miss Bredehoft comes across in a confident, protective, and almost motherly style, and I would think that Heard's team would probably want to position her next to Amber throughout trial to show that sort of subliminal motherly support. However, the problem with Miss Bredehoft's opening statement is the fact that she went on for too long, and it felt like she was just sort of throwing the kitchen sink in terms of the facts, so to speak. Her part 2 of the opening statement started to meander a bit through this sea of facts and events and incidents. And as someone who is more or less kind of sort of well-versed in this case, at least on the high points anyway, even I started to get lost in what it was that she was saying. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, if you're watching this and you are particularly interested in this trial and you're bored, the jury is probably also bored. So personally, I have a feeling that she may have even lost the attention of the jury by the end of her opening statement. Now, is that fatal? No, I really don't think so. This is day 1 of literally 4 to 6 weeks of trial. There is so much information that this jury is going to be picking up, and one little part of this first day is probably not going to be sticking out 4 to 6 weeks from now. But every step of the way, the main aim of these lawyers throughout this trial should be to make this a little bit easier for the jury to understand their case and their facts and their arguments. So, did you watch the opening statements? What did you think? Let us know in the comments down below. Anyway, the other thing that we saw today was our first witness. That was Christi Dembrowski, Johnny Depp's sister. On direct examination, she set the emotional tone and, in my opinion, came across as a very sympathetic witness. As a note, if you're not familiar, direct examination is when a party that calls a witness gets to ask the questions of that witness. The lawyer doing the direct examination is required to ask open-ended questions so that the witness testifies freely and without being led by the lawyer. This way, it's the witness that's testifying and not the lawyer. On direct examination, as I said, Ms. Dembrowski was very sympathetic. She talked about how she and Johnny had a rough childhood with a kind and gentle father and an abusive mother. She even detailed how her mom used to make them go outside and grab a switch, one that was very nice and green, and then she would use that switch to hit them. For my taste, I think they probably spent a little bit too much time on Johnny's parents before getting to more relevant testimony, but it was helpful to Johnny's case to show at least subliminally that he had a history of being around abusive women and learning to hide rather than fight, and still support them through it all. Ms. Dembrowski then went through basically Johnny's whole career since she later started working as Johnny's personal manager starting around the early 2000s. And then she got into basically the beginning, middle, and end of Johnny's relationship with Amber. She characterized their relationship as having a lot of fighting, but says she never saw any marks on Amber. Then around the end of her direct examination, she went in detail about the week Johnny's mother passed away, which ultimately happened on May 20th, 2016. This is significant because it is the actual day before Amber alleges that Johnny violently assaulted her and trashed their penthouse, and about a week before Amber went and filed for a domestic violence restraining order and for divorce. During this part of the testimony, as Ms. Dembrowski went through the details of that week and their mother's condition, she was, again, a very sympathetic witness. At one point, she did start to cry as she testified. It didn't interrupt her testimony, but it was visible to the jury, and it did look very sincere and authentic. But then came the cross-examination. Now, if you're not familiar, cross-examinations are done by the opposing party's lawyer. On cross-examination, the lawyer has to stick to the scope of topics that were brought up on direct. And unlike in direct examination, on cross-examination, they generally should be asking leading questions so that the attorney is basically testifying and the witness is giving just yes or no answers. A good cross-examination will be short, to the point, and very tight. The lawyer shouldn't give much room for the witness to postulate or explain, and the lawyer really should be in control of the dialogue. Here, Ms. Dembrowski was cross-examined by Mr. Roddenborn, who came in really hot and really aggressive out of the gate. This is one way to do it. Some might disagree with me, but I personally think that this is not the best strategy when it comes to a sympathetic witness who just opened up about what it was like to see her mother die and actually cried on the stand. But here he jumped right into questions about her potential bias, which is legitimately totally fair game. And not only is she Johnny's sister, but she gets the bulk of or all of her salary or income from her role as president of his production company, Infinitive Nile. Now, there was a weird exchange where he tried to impeach her on what she testified in court about her income coming from Johnny's production company, which again speaks to the aggressiveness of his style out of the gate, but which was actually not successful in the end because at the end of the day, what she said in court turned out that it was actually kind of the same thing that she had previously said in a deposition. And under cross-examination, impeachments really should be chosen maybe not sparingly, but choosingly. That's because it's an interruption into the flow, and if you're not successful, you can end up losing some of the attention of the jury. So if you're really trying to hammer down a certain point with the impeachment, you really should make sure that it's an important point. And here, it didn't really seem like it was the most important point that they were making, that they were maybe slightly disagreeing on. Anyway, the main part that Roddenborn seemed to want out of this cross-examination is the bit about her knowledge of Johnny's drug and alcohol use over the years. When this was initially brought up, Johnny's team tried objecting, but the judge properly overruled that objection. At the end of the day, these are bad facts that are just going to come in. So objecting when you know you can't keep them out entirely usually isn't the best idea because it signals to the jury that you'd rather they not see this. And usually that ends up making it more interesting to the jury, so they'll pay even more attention to it. The better strategy, in my opinion, is to be the first one to talk about it. Personally, if I were on Depp's legal team, I would have wanted to ask Ms. Dembrowski on direct examination about Johnny's struggles with drug and alcohol use or even addiction, and the ways he's found to try and deal with it, and the triggers that sometimes send him right back into that use. There was a really great opportunity here to use this to humanize Johnny so that the jury could say, okay, he's struggled, but he's human. We all have our demons. But again, other attorneys might see this otherwise. This is just me talking to you as a lawyer, talking in a small box on YouTube. Anyway, even after this objection, Ms. Dembrowski came across as very uncomfortable with giving this testimony, which is understandable, of course. She didn't want to say that she ever told Johnny to stop using drugs or to stop drinking. And the problem with that is that Heard's legal team has text messages showing her doing exactly that. So Mr. Rottenborn took those text messages and properly impeached her with them. They were texts that she had sent to Johnny years ago saying, "Stop drinking, stop coke, stop pills." Now, if Rottenborn had ended his cross-examination here, it would have been a pretty effective cross. You get the witness coming across as a little more calculating, a little more protective of bad facts, and you leave the jury with that impression. Instead, what he did was the tendency that every litigator has to fight against, and it's going for that 100% jugular move. You see, there's always this tendency to want to Hulk smash an opposing witness when you get them on impeachment or on a bad fact. It's so tempting because it feels so satisfying to get the opposing witness to say exactly what you want them to say. But in reality, it is so rare for the lawyer to be able to get that perfect answer. So what usually ends up happening is the lawyer just tries to wrestle with the witness, and the witness starts to wriggle out of the lawyer's control on cross-examination, and in the process, you start to lose the attention of the jury. When a lawyer starts fighting with a witness on cross-examination too much without getting clean responses from that witness, usually that means that the cross-examination is not going well. And that's basically what ended up happening here. After Rottenborn impeached Ms. Dembrowski with the "stop drinking, stop coke, stop pills" text messages, he tried Hulk smashing her by getting her to say the things that he wanted her to say. But all it really did was gave her an opportunity to clarify that she never saw Johnny Depp doing any drugs, and that basically the only reason why she had any awareness of any drug use was because Amber told her. Number one, if she had said that from the outset, all of this evidence about the drug and alcohol use would have been so minimized because the Depp legal team is arguing that Amber is a dramatic person and someone who exaggerates. And number two, Ms. Dembrowski ended up regaining control of the dialogue from then on out for the rest of the cross-examination. So at the end of the day, whether or not her testimony ends up benefiting Johnny or Amber is honestly up for grabs in my opinion. She probably is not the highest stake witness here, to be honest. And in my opinion, her testimony is a bit of a mixed bag that can benefit either one. Or alternatively, it may not move the needle either way. But the bigger question, as always, is was the jury paying attention? But with that, did you watch Ms. Dembrowski testify? If so, what do you think? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you found this interesting or at least informative. And if you did, I would love it if you'd hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded and so you can continue watching the live stream of this trial right here on this channel. See you in the next video.